Pooles Cavern was known as the first wonder of the Peak District as long ago as 1680. Modern visitors may enter in comfort, but before 1853, when the entrance was cleared and levelled, a guided tour of the cave was a much more difficult undertaking, and the first 20 yards had to be negotiated at a low stoop. It appears that the guides were sometimes of dubious character, and candles were the only available source of light.
And into Pooles Cavern.
It's strange now to imagine that earlier visitors gazed at these same scenes centuries ago, and yet there would be noticeable differences between what we can see now and what they saw then. Circumstances unique to Pooles Cavern mean that some of these formations grow at a surprisingly fast rate, perhaps gaining as much as several inches over 100 years. Excavations started near the entrance in 1981 show that man's association with the cave goes back as far as Neolithic times.
Perhaps the oldest discovery we found in here was a fireplace, which is basically where the hole was in the middle of the mud just here. And this proved that the cave perhaps would have been used as a shelter and a habitation. It's thought that Stone Age or Neolithic folk would have used the cavern to live in around about 5,000 years ago.
But the story of the cave itself started long before man came on the scene. In the depths of the cave, the River Wye flows between rocky banks. It is the very lifeblood of the cave, for although it now seems difficult to believe, it was this stream that over hundreds of thousands of years carved these immense caverns from the rock. When the Victorians first saw these vast subterranean panoramas by the light of a newly installed gas candelabra, they must have been awestruck. But they could never have seen them as today's visitor can, with the advantages of electric lighting, steps and footpaths. Pooles Cavern gives us all, young and old, the opportunity to take a priceless glimpse into a beautiful and unfamiliar world. The following video is designed to help you understand and enjoy that remarkable world a little better, and so provide a window into darkness. My name's Sid Peru. I've explored and made films about caves in many parts of the world. And yet still, when I come into a cave like this, I feel a sort of quiet excitement. It's a bit to do with entering another world, a world that has remained almost unchanged throughout the centuries, unaffected by day or by night, by summer or by winter, or even the vast changes that have occurred in the daylight world above us. In prehistoric times, caves were a place of refuge and comfort to man and animals alike. A dry cave entrance provided a natural home, a place where they could be protected from both the weather outside and from their enemies. The cave remained cool in the heat of summer and warm in the depths of winter. The remains of early man have been found in many cave entrances. But what did they think of the cave that stretched beyond the daylight and into the darkness? Few of them ventured far. There was little need to do so, but it seems that they regarded the depths of the cave as a place of magic, mystery, and superstition. In the story of man's exploration of the planet, the exploration of caves was a late starter. There were exceptions, but it was really only around the turn of the century that man truly began to overcome his superstition and to systematically explore the underground world. Fortunately, over the years, cave exploration techniques have become more refined. At its limits, modern cave exploration can still be an uncomfortable and occasionally a dangerous business needing specialised skills and equipment. Every year, new cave passages are still being discovered beneath our British landscapes. But it is possible to experience the underground environment with neither discomfort nor danger. Some of Britain's finest caves have been furnished with concrete paths and electric lighting to make them accessible to the public. Many thousands of visitors, young and old alike, flock to Britain's Showcaves each year. It's often more comfortable in here than it is much of the time in the weather outside, but you can still experience the true cave environment. It's also almost the only way that the delicate beauty of these accessible caves can be enjoyed by thousands and yet conserved for future generations. Although in this way, it's only possible to see a small section of the hundreds of miles of cave passage that are known in Britain, hopefully these visitors will go away knowing a little bit more about caves. And yet, how much do most of us really understand about how these caves were formed and about the limestone rock which surrounds them? This is the limestone country of the Yorkshire Dales. All over the world, limestone rock gives us some of the most spectacular and some of our most beautiful countryside. Features like these limestone pavements of the north or the deep gorges of Cheddar are the kind of features that make limestone country often easy to recognise. But it's only when we look in places like this that we begin to get a clue to the origins of this rock. This is a fossil bed, and believe it or not, it's a bed of fossil seashells called Productus. I have one here that's been removed from the rock, and you can see the classic shell-like shape. In other places we find fossil coral and even occasionally fossil fish, because although it may be difficult to believe, this rock started its life millions of years ago at the bottom of a tropical sea. In fact, about 350 million years ago, this section of the Earth's surface where the British Isles lie now lay in a different part of the world altogether, almost on the equator, and it looked altogether different to the way it does now. It was an area of shallow tropical seas, teeming with life, and not too unlike these tropical seas of today. Over countless years, thousands upon thousands of tiny creatures were born and then died in these seas. Their remains fell to the seabed and over the centuries built up into a chalky layer, sometimes hundreds of feet thick. It was a substance that the chemists call calcium carbonate. And millions of years later, it was to become this hard limestone rock that we know today. But it's here on these exposed pavements of limestone that we get a clue what makes limestone different from any other rock. Look at these vertical fissures. They were once minute cracks or joints, and they've been opened up by the rain that's fallen upon them and formed this incredible network of deep channels. The reason? Well, limestone can be dissolved, but not by ordinary water. As the rain falls through the air, it dissolves carbon dioxide and becomes a weak acid. And it's that weak acid that can attack this hard limestone rock. And that is the secret that makes our caves our underground rivers, and even indirectly stalactites and stalagmites possible. Streams which gather up there on the other rocks above us sink as soon as they get to here on the limestone rock, and they begin to carve themselves a whole new route underground. This is a classic piece of underground stream passage. If you can imagine what it'd be like to be here in full flood, the force of the water would be tremendous, and I'd just be washed away. But in fact, it gives you some idea of another way that the water cuts away at the limestone. In it, it carries gravel and sometimes quite large boulders, and they just grind away at the surface of the rock. It all started rather more quietly than that, up here in the roof. The water first found its way between this layer of rock above us and the rock below. And at first, it formed a nice circular tunnel. Then later, it began to cut downwards and created the canyon that's now below us. This passage also once vibrated to the sound of an underground river, and now it's virtually silent. Thousands of years ago, the river found a new route. Now perhaps it's somewhere below us. Why? Well, perhaps it was changes to the landscape outside. Perhaps it was a collapse that blocked the passage. Who knows? But in any case, what happened here was a new process. A slow process of building. Still today, with its endless patience, the water sculpts new rock forms. As each drip comes into contact with the air, as it hovers on the cave roof, so it releases a little of the limestone that it dissolved on its way from the surface. And it's in a special form of calcium carbonate that we know as calcite, and that's the stuff that stalagmites and stalactites are made of. These formations are formed just that way. Notice how they keep the same diameter as that of the drip itself. They're called straws because, like drinking straws, they are hollow and the water flows through the centre. With each drip, a minute amount of calcite is deposited round its rim, and the straw grows fractionally longer. In most cases, the straw will eventually become blocked, often by crystals that grow inside it, and the water is then forced to flow on the outside. The stalactite now starts to grow outwards as well as downwards, and we get the more familiar stalactite shape. But what about these stalagmites that grow upwards from the floor? Each drip that falls still holds dissolved limestone, and it coats the stalagmite with a thin film of water. And calcite is deposited just as before. It builds up layer by layer, but this time the growth is upwards instead of downwards. Here we have a different story. This sort of formation we call a curtain. And if we look at it carefully, we can get a clue how it's been formed. The water's running down this outer edge before it drips off at the bottom. And as it runs, it deposits calcite. If we look further into the formation, we can see parallel lines that actually indicate how the formation has grown outwards layer by layer over thousands of years. Similar processes produce a whole range of natural sculptures, each tinted by the natural colours of the minerals within the rock. Some shapes are easily explained, but others are more difficult. There's still a lot we don't understand about the cave environment. And yet what is really magic is to sit here in this chamber and to know that nothing has really changed apart from the drip-by-drip building of the formations since the Ice Age. This silt was probably washed into this cave as the glaciers retreated. In other caves, what looked like ordinary mud banks have lain undisturbed for even longer. And in them is locked all sorts of information about the world outside thousands upon thousands of years ago. And we're just beginning to learn how to interpret it. What's even more intriguing is that we know for sure there are many more caves left to discover under Britain's limestone hills, and we're going to be finding them for generations to come. And each one that we discover is going to tell us just that little bit more about the history of this beautiful landscape around us.